Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Write or Die Show. I'm your host, Randi-lee. On the show, we interview other writers and we talk about mental health from their personal journeys. If you have not already hit that like and subscribe button, go ahead, do that now so that you never miss an episode.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to, February 12th. Hello, how are you? February, the month that is shortest but feels like it's the longest. Anyways, today with us, we have Jennifer Shaw. Hello, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Where are you visiting us from?
A little town north of Calgary called Airdrie.
Never heard of that one. I'm in Ontario, so.
Yes.
Yes. I know when I was reading your sheet and I was like, oh, Alberta, oh, it's another Canadian. That's so much fun.
I
know. How cold is it there? Because you guys are much colder than I am.
It's not bad now. Today, I think it was minus 17. Well, yes, last I checked, it was minus 17. But the wind chill can make it feel like minus 20.
That's gross.
Or maybe that was yesterday. Maybe it's warmer today. I don't know. I have to look it up. But we did have a deep freeze. We're just kind of coming out of it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we are supposed to get a lovely little snowstorm. Although, I mean, compared to where you are, our snowstorms are probably nothing to compare to you. But for me, it's going to be gross. And it's the freezing rain that's coming later. That's the problem, right?
Yeah. We don't get as much freezing rain here, but we get a lot of Chinooks. So it'll be, I've seen it go from minus 20 up to plus 5 in the span of 24 hours.
Yeah. We get a lot of that.
Yeah. And we'll get a dump of snow and you'll be like shoveling like 3 feet of snow out of your driveway. And the next day it's like, where's the snow?
Right.
All turns to ice. So we don't get the freezing rain, but we do get the melt and thaw.
Yeah. We're supposed to be getting freezing rain. Well, I'm right by the Great Lakes. So we get all of that fun. But let's move away from cold and gross. I am not a winter person at all. I do not like skiing or skating.
I would love to hibernate.
Yes.
I'm pretty jealous of bears.
Right? I feel you on that one. I totally feel you.
Somebody said something about, I want to be reincarnated as a bear. That way I can sleep all winter and not have to shave my legs. It's not taboo.
I love it. I know for whatever reason, my husband and I, when on the weekend, we were talking about, if you ever were to come back in another life, what would be like the best thing? I go, a dog who is owned by a middle-aged lady who doesn't have no kids, so the dog is her child. Like you would just live your best life at that point.
Or even a cat who you can do whatever you want. You can have attitude all day and nobody cares. They just accept it because you're a cat.
Yeah, you just live your best life. I know my cats, I just had to clean up my office before we started because they threw everything on the ground. And track their little paws of cat litter everywhere and such. And they don't get in trouble because they're cats. I'm just like, and they're just
toddlers with an attitude.
Right? I like that. Yeah, they totally are. So tell me a little bit more about who Jennifer is.
So I'm a mom, I'm a wife, I'm an oldest sibling of 4. I've got 4 younger brothers. I've been a writer.
Are you the only girl then?
I thought my sole purpose in life was to babysit, and I made my brothers pay.
I love that.
Yeah, so I was kind of hoping for a daughter when I grew up, but I have 2 sons. But yeah, so I've actually been a writer for 33 plus years. I'm going to date myself here, but I started writing pen and paper, and then my mom bought me a typewriter.
I had a typewriter in college. Nobody else I knew did because typewriters were sort of obsolete at that point. But I loved the feeling of the and the paper,
Yeah, and you can adjust it so you can make it like closer, farther away. You can do like center. I mean, there was a way to do it, I'm sure. I had a nice fancy electric one that had like a whiteout strip, but I wrote for so long because I needed an outlet. I was very introverted, didn't have a lot of friends to speak to and stuff like that. We were living in a small town. So I just kind of needed that outlet turned into a hobby because I was like, as soon as I realized you can paint a picture with words, it was like, shh. And,
right. Yeah, I feel you.
And then it turned into a passion, and now it's just cheaper than therapy. I had never shared any of my work. And then in 2019, I was diagnosed with autism and ADHD following my son's diagnosis. And I thought maybe writing is my special interest.
My kid was diagnosed first too, and then I was. So.
Yeah. Both my boys were diagnosed. Like my oldest was diagnosed, then me, and then my youngest the following year. And so in 2019, I was like, okay, this is my special interest. I should share it, see if it's worth something. I sent it off, my manuscript for my first book in my series, to an editor, thinking the worst they can say is it sucks. And my editor came back and he said, this doesn't suck. You should publish. So 2 years later, I did.
That's awesome. I love how you're like, they might say it sucks. And they're like, it doesn't suck. That's be a great feeling.
That's great. I can move on. It'll just be for me. If they don't, then I know where to go. Like I can kind of, think about what I want to do, but I won't know if I don't step out there. So
True. So I cannot talk today. It's just words. So I am a writer because words are hard, but when you have time to think about them and have a backspace button, it doesn't matter. How old was the first son that was diagnosed? How old was he when he got it?
He was 4 when he was diagnosed.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what led you to get that diagnosis?
We were going through the ADOS assessment, which if anybody's gone through that, it's pretty intensive. It's like a 3-day thing. They see him in school. They talk about his history. It was pretty in-depth. And all the things that they were flagging as red flags, I was like, but I've done that my whole life. Yeah. So after his assessment, it came back as he definitely has autism. They would call it high functioning autism. Mm-hmm. I thought, I'm going to go see if I have it, because a lot of those things were me. So I went to my own I went to a registered psychologist and I did my own ADOS assessment, which they don't really have for adults. They had to modify it for an adult. And she said that I do have autism, and it would have been called Asperger's, but now it's just autism.
Yeah.
Yeah. But like my older son, I also have severe combined presentation ADHD. So my younger one doesn't have ADHD, or at least we don't know yet. We suspect he might have something, but it could also just be his autism. We don't know yet.
Yeah.
But that was a real eye opener for me. And then I've spent, years kind of analyzing all the things I did throughout my life. And I was just like, what? Now it makes sense. It makes sense why I was always a little quirky. It makes sense why I had a hard time talking to other kids. And I used to make notebooks of conversations because I didn't know how to talk to kids. And I was like, okay, so-and-so said that. Okay, this was the response. Oh, there was a smile. That must be what I'm supposed to say when somebody says that to me. And I have notebooks of conversations because that was how I learned to talk to people.
Oh, see, it's such a similar story. Yeah, my kid was diagnosed, and then she looked at me one day and go, Mom, I have autism, so do you. And I went, oh. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, let me go talk to somebody. And like you said, it's eye-opening. It makes things make sense.
Yeah. And I found that once I knew that, I've never considered it a disability. It can be challenging, right? As you know, but it doesn't, it's just things that people would learn naturally. I have to take that extra step and that extra effort to learn. It's not that I can't learn how to interact and overcome some of my, adversities, but it's a lot harder because it doesn't come naturally. I know eye contact was a big thing. And I remember, for a period of my teenage years, I couldn't look people in the eye. It was like, they're piercing into my soul. I couldn't look them in the eye.
And teachers are always like, look at me when I'm talking to you. And it's like, no.
Yeah. So I forced myself to look people in the eye. And now, but then, it's kind of difficult because it's either I can look you in the eye or I can look away and actually hear what you're saying. So, there's got to be that balance. So people think I'm not paying attention because I'm like wiper blades, right?
Yeah.
But I forced my kids to learn how to look people in the eye from the time they were, doing on the floor, babies, and I'm like over them and like face, like 6 inches away and like praising them every time they look me in the eye. So it was so frustrating when my kids were starting to show some of those red flags. It's like, oh, but they make good eye contact. Yeah, that's not a thing anymore, right? You can learn how to look people in the eye.
Right. Actually, so speaking of red flags, what are some of those red flags that because other parents might not know about them, right? Like way back when my kid was little, I didn't know much about it. And then I'm learning and going, oh yeah, she does that. Yeah. Oh yeah, she does that. Oh yeah, she does that. So what are they?
With both of my boys, they would sit in their high chair and just shake their heads randomly like this. It's just you know, I'm like, you're
gonna very boy trait. Yeah. Cause boys and girls do present different.
You know, I mean, there's some things that are just normal kid stuff, but if it goes to the excess, that's the thing, like lining up their little toys and stuff. I know my little guy would what he'd do? He'd line up his little toys and then he'd go and play somewhere else because, you know, he's done. I used to do that too with my toys. And then when I recognized it in him, I was like, that's exactly what I used to do. And if you come along and you move one of those little cars or you turn it or you take it away, heaven forbid, the world is falling apart. We had to take him away from the house to wash his bed sheets, or he'd freak out until they were back on his bed and they had to be the same sheets, or he would know. But I remember my littlest guy, you know, laying on the floor with his head in his little car and he's going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Or he had this little, you know, the little people's, it was like this construction thing and it had a little claw and he'd go like, open, close, open, close.
Yes.
Yeah. Just constantly, he could do that for hours. Yep. But my younger one is more of the OCD, things have to be perfect, and less on the social issues, although he still can't play alone and he still has a hard time seeing things from other perspectives. But my older son was very this typical social difficulties. Like he could care less if there was kids in the room. He just wanted the toy. He would climb over a kid to get the toy just because he wants that toy. He didn't care if anybody's in his way. He likes grown-ups. He was very, you know, friendly to grown-ups. And
very typical too is having friends that are either older or younger.
Exactly. And I did the same thing. I was all like the, you know, the suck up student, I guess they would call it, but it was just because I related to adults more than kids. It was easier because they're more forgiving of your social quirks. But he would go to the park and I remember it was like 6 years old, 7 years old. And he still he wanted to play with other kids. He was starting to get there, but he didn't know how to initiate conversation. So he'd just walk up to a kid and stand there and look at them like, they have to see me. Or he'd go in between two kids that are talking and he'd just stand there in the middle like, I want a conversation to happen. I don't know how to initiate it. So we had to teach him a script, you know, so that's what I'm saying. You can learn to overcome some of these things. There'll always be new things that come up as you grow and change. But, you know, these things don't come naturally to an autistic brain. But that being said, we don't miss anything. I've described it as your computer is on and every single tab is open. This is how I describe it to my kids. Your computer's on, every single tab is open. You got music playing here, you got a video playing here, you got something's trying to download here. And it's just too much. And all of a sudden, your computer freezes and you get the little swirly wheel of death or the blue screen of death.
Oh,
and you restart. And I said, that is when you become oversensitized. But you can't close any of those tabs. And then, you know, or if you get up in the morning and you have like, say, a shirt with an itchy tag, eventually, you know, neurotypical people will eventually ignore it, right? As you go through the day. A neurodivergent person, on the other hand, will notice not only the tag, but the fabric, the wind in their hair. If they've got a hair pulling here, they've got the glasses on their nose. I feel those all the time. Your watch is too tight. You're sitting on a hard chair or something, right? You notice everything. All that sensory input, and you have no filters for it. So it does become very overwhelming. So you have to learn how to filter things.
Yes. When you said the hair not right, oh my gosh, when I put my hair like in a braid or a ponytail or something and one little piece is not
right, and then it's
like, I have to start totally over because it will drive me crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
My mom the other day, she had like a little hair that was like a little out or whatever, and she goes, can you see it? It's like, not really, unless you're looking for it. She goes, okay, good. And she just went to work. I'm like, I couldn't do that.
I have a hard time with like stray hairs on people's shirts and it will drive me nuts. And I'll be like, I'm so sorry. I'm just going to get that hair that's on your shirt. Most people are good. Most people, you know, I mean, most of the people that I interact with nowadays, I don't make it a secret. I have autism. I feel that, you know, it's part of me. It's who I am. And if I'm a little quirky, then I can educate them on why, right?
Exactly.
But I want to pick a stray hair off of somebody's shirt and it was attached to their earlobe. It was growing out of their ear. I'm like, I am so sorry.
Oh my gosh. I know. I'm so bad.
Please, if I got a long hair like that and sitting on my shoulder, please pull it.
Right. Yeah, I know. I'll be like, I'll say to my husband, I'm like, you have a blackhead right there. And he's like, thanks for pointing that out. And I'm like, I can't stop staring at it now. And yeah.
I had a teacher that like, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I'm just kind of
I had a teacher that had a funny pattern on her shirt. And it looked like she'd spilt coffee on the front of her shirt, like down the one side.
Oh.
It was like a splotchy design. And I know it was a design of the shirt because I did go close up and just like to pretend to talk to her and stuff and look at her shirt. Oh, it's a
yeah.
But I could not concentrate in that class when she wore that shirt.
Yeah.
I have to go like this, like, so I couldn't see her shirt.
Right. I used to get in trouble all the time in school because I would be like doodling or writing poetry because that was my jam, but like doodling and stuff. And they'd be like, you need to listen. I'm like, I am listening. And like, I would do the assignment and it would be fine and whatever.
Yeah.
But they would think that I wasn't listening. So I remember the one teacher's English class. This happened a lot in English class because I would read the book much faster than what they were doing in class. So the teacher would think that I wasn't paying attention. She'd be like, okay, it's your turn to read. I'm like, I'm 3 chapters ahead. I don't know where you are, right? That whole reading aloud thing. I couldn't listen to other people read aloud. I wouldn't process it.
I didn't learn until probably about 2 years ago that I actually have mild dyslexia. So when I was in school, when I'm writing, a lot of times I'll miss those little words or I'll switch. The vowel teams are really hard. I had to actually I was homeschooling for a while and I had to learn a lot of the spelling rules, and that helped me a lot. But I have little, sayings that, like 2S day and Wednesday. We all do those ones, right? Those to just try to figure out, okay, where does the vowel team fit? So I'll get my computer to read back to me. But when I was in school, I never struggled in school really, but I remember I had a hard time reading not because I didn't understand reading, but because I get to the end of the line and then I'd be like, okay, where am I? Things have moved. So I'd start putting a book. So I put a bookmark underneath the line below and I'd read that line and then move bookmark down, read the line. I had a teacher who didn't like that. She came along, she's like, took my bookmark away and said, that's not how you read. So I'm like, I'm going to use my hand. Then you can't take that away. Right? You can't take that away. And I'll just read I'll just do that when she's not looking. But it wasn't as recognized when I was a kid. Any of these, if it was mild, it was just sign of like, oh, you're quirky, or, with ADHD, you're the hyper, trouble child or something. You can't sit still, got a lot of energy and stuff, or you need more discipline. And so I'm glad that my kids are getting a lot of that. But when I was going through school, I had to figure out my own methods, and it was very stressful not knowing where I fit. And that's why I dove into writing, because it was something I could control and I could create. And I didn't have to be judged by anybody because I never shared it until I got older.
Right, which is so nice. Yeah, when you're talking about that ruler method, I'm thinking nowadays you can actually buy those specialty rulers that have like this
one line at a time. Yeah,
and you can move them along. And now the teachers are like, here you go, have this.
Well, things like, it was just a different world back then. Like my youngest is left-handed. He's the first person in our family back 2 generations that we know of or maybe more that we know of who is left-handed. And I remember being in grade school, like grade 2, grade 3, and there was a kid who was left-handed. And I remember, it was a different world. The teachers could go up and slap your left hand out of you, slap that left-handedness out of you. And I'm just like, I'm like, why are we doing that? Why not embrace it? Does it matter? I mean, the only thing I've insisted is when they're using the computer, the mouse is on the right side. Because if they go into a work environment, more times than not, it's going to be on the right side. But everything else, I'm like, who cares if you're writing with your left hand?
But it is actually, I learned it is pretty easy to put the mouse on the left side. There's a setting you can just switch it. So when I was working in data entry for a little bit, I'm right-handed, but the girl I took over for, she was explaining how, and she was also right-handed, but she was explaining how it was easier to get a left-handed mouse and use the mouse on the left hand because you had to put so many numbers in and everything. So it was easier to keep your dominant hand for the keypad and just quickly move the mouse. So I learned how to be ambidextrous with the mouse on the left hand. It was definitely a change, but she was completely right that it was easier to keep the mouse on the left so that you weren't always having to use the mouse, right? Use the mouse and then move your hand back over to the keypad. And then you could just, made it much, much faster.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I know, just because there is left-handed mouses out there, but they're not always going to be available. And I didn't want him to struggle. And
it is a nice skill to learn to be ambidextrous with a mouse, but that's just it. Never. But it was interesting. I haven't worked that job in probably almost 10 years. So it would be very interesting to put a mouse back in my left hand again and see how I do.
I tried cutting with a left-handed scissors and I was like, I'm going to end up like taking off a finger. I can't do this. And, it's like trying to braid your hair in the mirror. It's like, okay, there's a disconnect here.
Yeah. So those poor people that, get the left-handed slapped out of them are used to, right?
Yeah.
Oh my
I
goodness. The
know.
struggle to try and use your not dominant hand.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just, it's unfortunate they, there's, I mean, I'm lucky in a way that I was so creative and I was come up with my own ideas, but I'm happy that my kids are going to get more recognition.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're going to get more help. And then it's, there's a lot more education about it. And I was never, once I was diagnosed, I was not shy about sharing it. And, with those people that I know, or sharing it on my media, because it is a part of me. And I had so many people texting me or messaging me like, how did you find out? What did you do to get tested? And, just questions like they think they might have autism. Yeah. What's frustrating is those people that say, oh, I think we're all a little autistic. And I was like, well, yeah, it's not like we're growing horns, it's all the same similar behaviors. It's just to the extreme that it becomes.
Yeah. And on that same wavelength, the one that bugs me is back in my day, there wasn't so many autistic people.
Yes. It was because they weren't recognized. They were there.
Yeah. So my mom said that to me the one day. And my mom is not like, it's hard to describe. She's not against being autistic. Like when I got my diagnosis, she's like, see, I knew there was something different about you. Like she felt vindicated in it because she kept asking for help when I was younger.
Yes.
But they were just, she's just having a temper tantrum. And it's like, no, I'm having a sensory overload. It has nothing to do. She's spoiled. You're spoiling her. Nope, that's not the case. Yes. So my mom was very happy when I got my diagnosis, and she's never treated Lev any differently when she got diagnosed. But my mom was just trying to wrap her head around how all of a sudden all of these people have this diagnosis now.
Yes.
So there is people who genuinely don't understand. Yeah. And then of course there are those people that, like you said, we're all a little bit autistic, or just why are there so many now? Yeah. And like you said, it's because they weren't recognized. More and more of us, especially in our adulthood now, are going, hey, I wish I would have known this when I was younger. I'm going to go and find this answer.
I mean, I wouldn't have been waiting for so many years for my alien parents to pick me up, because I really felt like I was on a different planet.
Yeah, exactly.
I felt like I was just like, there was some disconnect there. I couldn't understand how everything came so easy. And then a lot of times people, like autism, ADHD, there's also a lot of comorbidity of anxiety and depression. And I think that maybe, I don't know if the statistics are as high now, but I can certainly see that just the misunderstanding and, but my mom too was not, it was funny because she was totally on board with the ADHD diagnosis. But as soon as I mentioned autism, it's like, oh, he makes eye contact and he plays. Yes, kids play. They still play. He didn't play with toys per se. We had to actually go on YouTube and show him videos of people playing, and we had to demonstrate it for him, but he learned to play. He didn't play with toys until he was 5, though.
Yeah, Lev used to watch people playing on YouTube, or if she played toys. So she loved My Little Pony. Yes. So she had all the little ponies. And she would play, and she'd be like, play with me. And so I thought, okay. But you had to play her way.
Oh, yes.
You couldn't make up your own story. I also couldn't read her mind to know what the story was.
I know, and it's so frustrating.
Right? And she would get so mad at me because I wasn't doing it right. And I go, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. So, and she would act out the same scenes that were, say, in the TV show that she was watching. It would be the exact same scene. So it needed to be done the same way because it's the same character.
Yeah, and that's what they know, and that's what they're repeating. And I did the same thing. I played with My Little Ponies, and I would set up my I Can Read books. I don't know if they still have those, but they were the hardcover ones. And I'd set them all up, kind of open them and set them on edges and make like little walls and little rooms. And I'd set my little ponies up and stuff like that. And then I was done. It was all set up. I mean, when I got older and I started playing a little bit more, it was things that I had seen on TV. I was like running through a script. Yeah. And, I didn't vary from that script, and it was the same play every single time. It didn't get boring because it was comfortable. Yeah.
And I think that's a really big one that people don't talk about a lot because, again, girls and boys present very differently. Boys will do more of the typical hand flapping and rocking and shaking the head.
And you run in a circle kind of thing.
boys are more typically to do that stuff, whereas girls, we are more of a mimicking kind of thing.
Yes,
So
we hide a lot better.
Exactly. So it's those things that I didn't think much of when Lev was little, because again, I did those things when I was little, so whatever. But then when you start talking to other parents, or people are mentioning she should be more interacting and imaginative with the playing. I'm like, oh,
yeah. It wasn't until preschool. And I remember they had a psychologist that would visit their site, and they actually talked to me. That the preschool teacher was telling me there's some things that are not, up to milestone par kind of thing. Can you come in and check him? And that's what she talked to the psychologist, and the psychologist came in and then took me aside, and she didn't come out and say it. She said there was red flags, and, they were talking about social communication and emotional regulation and, play behaviors and stuff like that. And he doesn't want to play with other kids, and he could care less that there are other kids in the room unless they're doing something that looks really cool. Then he wants to be all for that. And he's very hyperactive. And, and then she says, just so we're on the same boat, when I say red flags and I mention all these, what are you thinking? And I say, well, I'm obviously it sounds like autism. And she's like, okay, good. We're on the same page. Cause she couldn't come out and say it. Right. Cause he wasn't.
Okay.
And so when I took this to his pediatrician who specializes in ADHD, she was convinced it was just ADHD.
There is so much overlap between the two.
There is. And she wouldn't listen to me about the autism. And so I had to get a private assessment. Fortunately, the preschool offered that for us.
Oh, good.
And so he ended up with a private assessment that said, yes, indeed, he does. It was with registered psychologist, ADOS assessment, took 3 days, got the report, says he does. Pediatrician said, well, I still think it's ADHD. I actually had to bring the registered psychologist into the meeting with my pediatrician to tell her, no, it is not. It is not just that. And she's like, well, he does have ADHD, right? And she's like, yes, but he also has this. She's like, okay, well, I knew he had ADHD. And I was like, what are you stuck on that for?
Well, because the thing is, if they're not specialized, autism really is a specialty to know how to recognize and diagnose it.
Yes.
And so I think when they don't have that, it is really hard for them to see it or admit it, especially when they know this other thing so well. With mine, the first psychologist, she diagnosed, again, it was ADHD and a slew of other things that she was diagnosed with. And then she finally said, okay, it's autism, after lots and lots of time. But then later, so that one retired, and all of her clients went to another one. And this other one, she was fantastic doctor, psychologist. She got Lev on the best medication for her that's really, really helped with the depression and anxiety that she had. But she was really, again, stuck on the anxiety piece and the depression piece. And that doctor would never admit that she had autism. And then we already had the diagnosis. This other doctor was like, I don't know. But we had already luckily been referred to, it's called Bethesda here. And that is our autism place. That is the specialty place here. Right.
And so Child Development Center.
Yeah, exactly. So it's same. So then went through all of the assessment again with this psychologist. And again, it came out, she's got autism. So I'm like, even though this other doctor doesn't necessarily agree with it, because again, she's just not specialized in it. Yes. The specialty doctor is confirming it. So I'm going to believe her.
Yeah.
But that other doctor still was phenomenal with making sure that the medication was proper, because other doctors had put her on some stuff that really made things worse. Yes. And it was such a trial and error, and that other doctor was just so sweet, so caring. But she just needs a little bit more knowledge in autism.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot more knowledge coming out. But at the CDC center, when Morgan was finally diagnosed, that's when our pediatrician referred us to the Child Development Center, which is where the doctors will send the kids, refer them to there to get the diagnosis. We had to get the diagnosis first, and then she referred us. My younger one had not yet gotten the diagnosis. And it was right around, the pandemic type time period, it worked out. I don't know how it worked out, but he ended up getting my younger son ended up getting a private assessment from his registered psychologist at his preschool at the same time that the developmental pediatrician was also diagnosing him. The ADHD assessment from the registered psychologist said, yes, he definitely has it. It's a little bit more than mild. He's showing a lot of really clear signs, and he definitely has it. We've gone into history. We've gone into watching and observing his play. We've gone into his classroom. We've interviewed the parents, and, big in-depth thing. The developmental pediatrician was asking me more questions about, like, when was he born? Was he born on time?
Yeah.
When did he start sleeping? When did he start walking? When did he start talking? And then, so they said, definitely has it. She said, I don't know. I think he might have it, but I'm just going to say he does. And then in a year's time, you come to me and I'll just take that away. And I'm like, so then a year's time comes. So, and she said it was so he could get help at school. Yeah. And I was like, he's already getting help. I'm not, I just need it recorded, right? So he can get help when he's older, right? Yeah. Anyway, when it came time to come in to take away his diagnosis, so to speak, because I was also seeing her for my older son too. I refused to see her again for my second son. Yeah. But when I was seeing her for my older son, because my older son has to be on 3 different medications. She was telling me, she mentioned something. And this is one reason why I didn't want to talk to her. I didn't trust her. Is she says, oh, I don't think Avery has it. And Morgan's my older son, is like, he seems really, he makes eye contact. So I don't think he has it. And you seem pretty well adjusted. So I don't think you have it either. And I was just like, so you're going to base your professional opinion on I don't think, like
and a lot of people, especially I think for us as adults with it, we have learned how to adapt and how to hide it and mask it when you're only interacting with a person for a short period of time, like a doctor. You're only really interacting for a very short period of time. Yeah. But the more that my husband always likes to joke. So my husband and I have been together. We will have been together for 18 years this year. Oh, he always jokes. He goes, I started dating somebody who wasn't autistic because you hid it from me. And I was like, oh, honey, it didn't last that long where I hid it from you.
Yeah, it doesn't disappear. You just learn to deal with it.
Yeah, but it's the running joke, right? Because if it's a short amount of time, you can hide it from people. You can mask.
And we are experts at masking it. Masking is the term that I think that they use more often. It's like you're putting on a mask to hide your autism. And then you break down in a dark room and cry your eyes out and desensitize from the whole wide world for,
Exactly. Yeah.
And I know being as a grown-up, learning my own strategies and stuff, I would teach my kids because I thought this was normal. And, I had somebody ask me one time after I was diagnosed, oh, what's it like to have autism? And I was like, I don't know. What's it like to not? It's all I know.
Right? Exactly.
It's like to not have autism, and I'll explain what it's like too, because it's all I know. So I just use those strategies that I learned that I expected everybody was teaching their kids. Yeah. And they were able to mask a lot of, like, especially my younger one, mask a lot of those symptoms. So that by the time he did go to the Child Development Center, he was doing a bit of masking, and it wasn't as clear. Also, high functioning autism is a lot harder to diagnose than unless you're, and that was when my age too, going to school, is unless you were disruptive or you had a learning disability, or physical disability, nobody recognized that you needed help.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's the same for us, right? That's what my mom always used to say. People would say that you were spoiled because you were doing fine in school. You weren't disruptive. You weren't this.
Yeah. I never struggled in school.
And then it was the same with Lev. She was kind of like odd, but masked enough that it wasn't as prevalent until she gets older, because the older you get, the harder it becomes to mask
because social interactions become a lot more complicated and life becomes a lot more involved.
Exactly. So then it becomes more intense and more complicated. So then you can see it more and more and go,
yeah. I saw things from early on that I remember my oldest being about 4 or 5 months old. And I remember mentioning to somebody, it's like, he's doing some things that I'm not sure are normal, but I don't have any other kids to compare him to.
Right.
and I wasn't going to ask my mom because, he cried. Like my older son cried all the time. Every minute he was awake for the first like 3, 4, 5 months of his life, he cried. And they say colic, right?
Yes.
But colic is an umbrella term. And he cried every second he was awake. I didn't sleep long enough to dream.
And you still had a second one.
Yeah, well, the second one was easier as a baby because I'm like, okay, I could survive that. Toddlerhood was hard. I was like, I know what I'm getting into, and I love him to death. So I had a second one, and my second one was such a good baby until he was about 18 months old, and then he just hit a brick wall, and he entered his teenage years at 18 months old, I swear, and he hasn't gotten out of them. But he also, with my first one, he had a mild speech delay. With my second one, he was babbling and, kind of progressing. And then at 9 months, he just went silent.
Yes, that's pretty common. Yeah.
He picked it back up right where he left off. So by the time he was 18 months old, he only had like maybe 20 or 30 words in his vocabulary. And he was about between 3 and 3.5 before he started putting 2 words together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a very clear indicator of autism right there. That's the obvious one.
He would chew on things too, which is another clear sign.
Yeah,
he was constantly chewing on things. And I was trying to tell his preschool, because I was trying to say, hey, is this normal? Like, is this normal for kids to chew on things? And they said, yes, at 3 years old, because he was diagnosed when he was 3. At 3 years old, it is normal to chew on things. I said, but is it normal to chew on things so that they're chewing off the collars of their shirts? They're chewing pieces off of toys. They're wearing down their baby teeth. They've always got something in their mouth. Like, is that normal? I said, no. Which it is normal for kids to chew on things at that age, but it's not normal to do it to the excess. And that's where the definition, that's where the line is drawn.
Yes, exactly. So what would you tell, I'm going to say, what would you tell other parents who are like, something's different about you? What would you tell those parents as a piece of wisdom?
Don't Google. Google's not. If you go to your doctor and your doctor still says, I don't think so and stuff, and you're still questioning about it, be your kid's advocate. Tell your doctor you think there is something wrong. In your heart of hearts that there's something wrong. If your doctor won't listen, go to a different doctor. If they won't listen, get a private assessment. They can be expensive. I think for mine, it was close to $2,000, but it's better to find out and have them get into the right, get the right education to help them to learn these skills so they don't have to figure it out on their own and feel like they're an alien dropped off on this planet. I'm allowing myself, once I got my diagnosis, to give myself permission to now ask. I have a hard time with sarcasm and jokes. I don't get them. I think I take them literal. Somebody says, the one that still gets me is don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. And I'm like, why would you throw it? I literally picked somebody with a little baby bathtub and a baby and they're throwing it out the window. Yeah. And I'm just like, I can't get my mind around.
Did you ever read the Amelia Bedelia books?
Yes, I did.
I identified with her so hard, so literal. Yep. And I loved those books. And that's what that quote makes me think of.
Yeah. And other things I maybe would tell parents, and I have told parents when they've come to me and they said, how do you deal with it with your kids being with autism? And I said, it doesn't change who they are. They are still your child. Just because they were not told they didn't have autism yesterday, now they have autism. They still had it from the day they were born. They haven't changed. They can still learn. It's not the end of the world. It's just going to take them. There's some things that they won't learn naturally, and you have to teach them. Things like playing with toys. It's something you have to teach them. They can still learn. It is not the end of the world. That's why I don't think about it as, I try really hard not to think about it as a disability. Mm-hmm. It's a challenge in my mind. But I mean, the stress, they're going to be overwhelmed. And I tell them all about the computer analogy and the tag on the shirt analogy. When I go for walks to this day, I notice every single thing. And I still, to this day, I will watch the cars drive by and add up the numbers on their license plates until I get a single digit. It's just my thing.
Yeah. Right. I know. I'm like, I look at everything, but I'm also oblivious to the obvious things.
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, it was normal for me. I thought everybody did it, right? How do you identify when you think it's normal?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So I interrupted you too.
No, that was all I was saying.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay. So what, tell us about your books.
So going through school, I figured out that I learn a little different. I think outside the box. In school they teach you letters and then you put them together into words and then sentences, paragraphs, and so forth. I learn the other way. I have to see the big picture and break it down into component parts before I understand it. But being an out of the box thinker, I'm always thinking, well, what if? So I remember one of the questions we were talking about the difference between, because I went through X-ray school, we're talking about the difference between soft organs and hard organs. And I was like, or no, I guess the one that was a better example is we were talking about lymph nodes and where they are. And I remember watching something about the plague and how your lymph nodes were really swollen and how they treated them. And then, used to treat them back in the 1600s or so. So, but I didn't see that. That all happened in my head. So what I did was we're talking about lymph nodes in school. And I said, what if someone has the plague? And everybody's like, what? Where did that come from? I knew where it came from. I just assumed everybody else knew where it came from. So this creative out of the box thinking and people watching, trying to figure out the world has helped me to be very creative and observant. And I started writing my series that I have out now currently because I thought, what if fairy tales were more than stories? Monsters were flesh and blood. We just didn't know it. What would it be like? And so then creating this series, there's our world, our time, and coexisting magical realm. There's a veil that separates us. We can't see or cross this veil. We don't have magic. But these creatures that do can and have, and they've been the source of inspiration for our mythologies. My main character is a young man born with the ability, and his name's Callum Walker. He's born with the ability to use magic. He doesn't know why. He's trying to make the most of it. He gets embroiled in what's going on in this magical realm because with magic, he can cross that veil. And then we follow him through each book where he's trying to figure out, who he is, where he fits in, because he's too magic for here, too human for there, and master his abilities to survive. I'm a very big Game of Thrones, Lord of the Rings, supernatural TV fan, and I like those elements. I try to draw inspiration from those, little tidbits and stuff, but I also like to put wholesome messages of things that I've learned. And about the only thing I don't write, I didn't intend to write a magic fantasy epic, with this big world and stuff. But the only things I don't write is I don't write mystery because I don't feel like I'm smart enough to figure out who done it. I write history because I fall asleep, and I don't write spicy romance. I'll do some romance, but I don't do spicy romance because nobody has 3 chapters worth of stamina in my mind, and we don't need to see what's happening behind the door because nobody has that much flexibility, And if they have kids, they don't sleep. I think that's,
if you have kids, like I don't even know. So this is TMI, but we were on vacation in January without the kids. Just imagine that.
Yeah.
Now we've been back for the month and we have kids in the house.
Yes.
Just imagine that.
Kind of kills the mood. Yes. No, we went on our first just parent vacation this last summer. We went to San Francisco, but we double dated with a friend and her man. And so, it was a little different. We also got sick too when we were there. We got a bad head cold. We were all like sniffly and stuff. So yeah, it wasn't as like, honeymoon-ish as you'd think it would be because we just felt like crap for half.
Yeah, that's never a good thing.
Yeah.
Oh, geez. So what is the series called?
It's so if you go to the series itself is called Callum Walker series, but each book in the series. So the first book is The Ascension, second book is The Convergence, the third book is The Fractured Veil. My fourth book, which will be coming out, is called The Forsaken Souls. And I'm going to be working on my fifth book eventually. It's a series. I don't know how many books there's going to take to get to the end, but I know where the end is going to happen. Like I know what the ending is. I just don't know how long it's going to take to get there.
Yeah.
But if you go to my website, jmshawauthor.com, you can see all my books. When my fourth one comes out, you'll see it there. Read this. You can read the synopsis. I have an events page that'll tell you where I'm going to be for book signings. And I have on the bottom of the page, I have my Goodreads link. I've got Instagram, Facebook, email. I have a lot of people emailing me like, how did you find a good editor? Or, like different things like that. I don't mind answering questions.
Yeah. Awesome. I love that. And well, you already answered my other question. Where are you? Like, where do people follow you? So
yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on the show. You go and hibernate now. I also hibernate now. And just keep doing what you're doing.
Oh yeah, I've been writing for 33 plus years. I'm gonna write to the day I die because it is who I am.
Yes.
I am a writer at heart.
Love that.
Yeah.
As always, thank you so much for the amazing guests that we have on the show. Be sure to check out their links down in the description below. If you want to support the channel, go ahead and check out our merch store. We've got some very cool things on there. That's my favorite. Sorry, I'm busy ending the stigma. But there's some other very cool designs. 10% of the proceeds always goes back to the Canadian Mental Health Association. Be sure to follow us on Facebook at RB Media because we have some great new shows coming up and you never want to miss any of those episodes. And remember, the only way to end the stigma of mental health is to speak openly and honestly. Bye!